I thought because I'm actually interested in Godzilla Minus One that it might be nice to talk a bit more about it at length. Besides my reaction video, it's pretty rare these days that I'm actually interested in a movie that's coming out. um, I try to keep things more light on this channel, but I am pretty cynical when it comes to modern Hollywood and whether things are worth seeing. I've established that I'm kind of done with the MonsterVerse, but I'm done with a lot of things. Done with, well, I was never really into Marvel to begin with. I was always more of a DC guy, but I'm done with that too. I'm done with Disney live action remakes. Never got into the live action Transformer movies, and that seems like most films are of that kind. Um, there's a few things coming out that it's like, we'll go see it, sure. Like, will I see the next part of Dune? Sure, I guess. Why not? I can't say I'm like excited about a lot of movies, but I'm actually looking forward to Godzilla Minus One, and I'm glad that it's actually coming out this year, so I don't have to like keep trying to hold on to an interest in it. So it's something worth talking about. I don't even feel like this urge like I have to be like cautiously optimistic about it. I'm actually just optimistic. I feel like I have good reason to be optimistic because Takashi Yamazaki is an excellent filmmaker. And if you're not familiar with his work, do make a point of checking it out. Um, you can get like the list if you look on Wikipedia or Mubi or whatever. You can see the list of films that he's done, and they kind of partition neatly into these two or maybe three categories. He does have work in animation, particularly with CGI animation, which is not something that I'm accustomed to from Japan, right? Because it's one of those things where anime is such a beautiful art form in its own right that why would you bother with CGI? Like the CGI hasn't reached the same standard that anime is already at, right? So why would you bother until the technology is at the point where you can basically replicate anime? But he does have some films like Friends, Naki on Monster Island, Stand By Me, Doraemon, Lupin the Third, the first, and oh yeah, and a sequel to Doraemon, and Dragon Quest, Your Story. So he does have that CGI animation. Then he has his science fiction work. So the two Parasite films. He also did the live action space battleship Yamato film as well. So if you're not really into historical dramas, which is his third category of movies, then a good entry point into Yamazaki's films would be his science fiction ones. So Space Battleship Yamato probably being the most accessible if you're into 1970s anime, Leiji Matsumoto. Um, you might have already seen Space Battleship Yamato by now, anyways. But that's, check that out. But then he has this third category of the historical dramas, almost all of which, there's one which is called Ballad, which is like a feudal Japanese swords epic, samurai epic. Um, but most of his historical movies take place either during the war or in the post-war period. So Eternal Zero, which is about a Japanese fighter pilot who kamikaze, but don't want a kamikaze. Um, Great War of Archimedes is a fictionalized historical drama around the building of the Yamato. The actual, so you go from space battleship Yamato to doing a movie about the actual Yamato battleship during the Second World War. And then there's the Always Sunset on Third Street trilogy, which is probably the best work that he's produced, in my opinion. Like Yamato's okay. It's one of those cases where you really just watch the anime. Like it doesn't need a live action version of the anime because anime is fantastic, and I appreciate that in Japan animation is considered a medium, it's considered an art form. So there isn't like that idea that like animation is just stuff for children. Animation is illegitimate. It becomes legitimate when it gets a live action film. Um, No. So I'm not like overwhelmed with interest in Japanese live action adaptations of anime. Like I haven't even seen the Attack on Titan live action films. Not interested. The cartoon is fine. I have seen Yamato though. It's okay, but and that's what probably what most anime fans would know his work from. But Always Sunset on Third Street, I think, is his best work as just these charming character dramas of life in um, in post-war Japan, but not immediately after the Second World War. This is the period um, of Japanese recovery, right? So the first Always Sunset on Third Street, one of sort of the big symbolic backdrop pieces to it is the building of Tokyo Tower, and what that represents in terms of Tokyo's entry into the the post-war modernity, right? The the new age of Japan and the new burgeoning economy, and what that means for these characters transitioning from the old ways in imperial Japan and the wartime economy and traumas and so on into sort of modern Japan of the 1960s. Always Sunset on Third Street 2, as if you were into Godzilla, this is probably the one that you most likely have seen, or at least seen that clip of at the beginning of the movie with the Godzilla scene in it. Um, the rest of the movie is, again, just carrying on the lives of these characters and this character drama, and of how these characters are adjusting to the new Japanese economy and the new Japanese lifestyle that is emerging. And then Always Sunset on Third Street 3 takes place during the Olympics, um, which I always forget the date of. But the 1964 Olympics, Tokyo Olympics. So that's then you get that from the building of Tokyo Tower, that emergence of Japanese modernity, to the '64 Olympics, Japan emerging onto the modern stage now, right? The global modern stage with the Winter Olympics, or the not Winter Olympics, but '64 Olympics. Um, there's also another post-war film that Yamazaki has done, a man called Pirate, which is about the post-war recovery. And you take these films now, and his World War II films, his post-war recovery films, and his Always Sunset on Third Street, um, Japan entering into modernity, and then you can plunk Godzilla Minus One like right into that, right? I'd be interested to see if you could just watch them like all back to back, because he does a very distinctive visual style as well. Like you look at that teaser trailer, and it's like, yep, that's a Yamazaki film. It's not his style isn't quite as pronounced as say like a Wes Anderson, where it's like you're definitely watching a Wes Anderson movie. Um, but it's a little more subtle than that. But you can still if you're familiar enough with his work, you can recognize that like yeah, that's a Yamazaki film. Um, so I'd be interested to see if you could just like watch, Eternal Zero, Great War of Archimedes, A Man Called Pirate, Godzilla Minus One, Always Sunset on Third Street, and boom, 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 and if it would kind of like almost make sense, maybe not as a singular narrative, but as a body of work, right, about this time period in Japanese history. Be interesting to see that, and which is also why another reason I'm looking forward to Minus One is not just because of this particular director, um, but um, like I talked about this in my previous video, on my reaction video, but the Reiwa era is kind of, as I was talking about this with other people since I made that video, um, the Reiwa era is kind of like the art house version of Godzilla. It's the art house era of Godzilla. Um, so, Shin Gojira is this like, I mean, over budget, but still in a very real sense, like this art house black comedy remake of the original Godzilla in post Fukushima milieu. The Netflix trilogy um, is not well liked among Godzilla fans, and I haven't even heard buzz about it among anime fans either. Right, so it's this very oddball thing. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I will say that it did spark philosophical discussion about its themes and images and symbolism between my wife and I we discussed those movies for longer than the movie was. You know, the movie like an hour and a half, whatever, and we ended up having like a 3 hour discussion about the meaning of it and what it's talking about in in this. And it's actually I'd be worth probably doing a video about some point here about you know, yes, the movies have some pacing problems, and you probably could have distilled it all down to like one or two films. But there's a lot of symbolic heft going on between those movies in terms of what the different alien species represent and what the monsters that they produce represent, and how those interact with each other, and what the movie's saying about, you know, humankind's relationship with technology, with nature, with the universe in general, um, sort of our economic and philosophical and religious and spiritual relationships with um, these different uh, these different aspects of sort of society as represented by these different alien groups and these different monsters. Singular Point is a much more like accessible sort of anime, um, but it's got some weird stuff going on, and I like it. I liked it. I have to watch it again so I can understand a bit more better what's going on. But I liked that it even did something as new and weird and different with the monsters as making them smaller. You know, we keep getting Godzilla getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, Godzilla Earth is like a mountain. Um, but you know, they in Singular Point they actually make them smaller, which actually poses a strange, like a new and different kind of threat to human beings. Um, and you get that sort of and it climaxes in this sort of like apocalyptic anime melancholy that I kind of do enjoy. Maybe not is not the right word, but you know, when you get those anime where it's like, you know, humanity has been essentially all but destroyed, and all that's left is the teenage girl mech warrior and her boyfriend, and like that sort of sensibility of humanity on the brink of extinction. Um, you get that sort of sense with a lot of Singular Point as well, which I enjoy. And then you have this Godzilla Minus One, done by a very visually distinctive director, fitting into this body of work. Um, but again, it's sort of like this art house era of Godzilla. These aren't the big action summer tentpole movies like the MonsterVerse. These are much smaller and more inventive, and in my opinion, interesting sort of like art movie versions of Godzilla, which I am totally down with. Godzilla has been around for a million years now, and we've sort of done everything we can do with him um, up to the end of the Millennium era. You know, we've done the Showa series, we've done the Heisei series, we've done you know, the Millennium. So you know, the Showa series is a series. It's the original one of the original cinematic universes. The original cinematic universe is Universal Monsters, of course, but you know, it's mid-century sci-fi, mid-century Japanese sci-fi is what um, Showa era is about. The Heisei was, you know, 90s action movies, but very much about like we want to try and maintain like an actual continuity that didn't necessarily exist with the Showa era. Um, Continuity of the suit, continuity of the story, and each movie building off of the one preceding it. Um, Millennium diverged from that to have these one-off sort of films, and inventive in their own right as well. Like GMK is doing something different. Um, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, which is one of my favorite of the Millennium series. You know, it's a live-action anime. It's following those tropes as what Godzilla as an anime. We first sort of go with that, um, but not always successful in the Millennium series because they're still very much trying to be modern, you know, 2000s action movies. Um, Whereas again, this one, Reiwa era is this art house version, much more introspective, much more creative and inventive and oddball films, which is why they're not to every Godzilla fan's liking. But I'm okay with that. I'm cool with that. I like cool and interesting and innovative and visually interesting movies, and so which is why, you know, everybody hates Shin Gojira except me. It seems sometimes in the Godzilla fan community. I thought Shin Gojira was amazing, and it's the Godzilla movie that I show people who I want to convince that monster movies aren't just about dumb action, right? That they can they can be philosophically interesting and politically topical and visually stunning movies in their own right. Um, Shin Gojira isn't just one of the best Godzilla movies; it is one of the best movies I've seen. Period. So I'm really hoping and optimistic, and I think reasonably optimistic, that Godzilla Minus One is also going to um, be that sort of thing, politically topical, historically interesting, visually appealing sort of movie. One correction I have to make, though, to my original reaction is that we've now gotten a fuller look at the monster. Because right on the heels of releasing the trailer, they put out the first merchandise listings there we go, the first merchandise listings for stuff, including the SH Monster Arts figure, the Bandai Movie Monster series, um, soft vinyl figures, and various other merchandise. And so we got to have a fuller look at the monster. And when I saw this art pop up, I was like, oh, okay, that is obviously Heisei Godzilla. Like, that is how he looks. And with the ridges on the head, especially, and just that pose, that face, that angle, I looked at that and, like, oh, okay. So my slight correction is that it's not sort of like Showa through the lens of Shin Gojira. This is um, Heisei Godzilla ramped up to the next level. I think maybe what threw me off a bit was that in Godzilla versus Gigan Rex, that is Heisei Godzilla. That's Junior. That's little. Um, that all grown up now, and he doesn't look like Heisei Godzilla, but this one definitely does now. Godzilla Minus One, which has now made me sort of want to go back and look at the ride version, um, which now I'm seeing more of that Heisei influence in the ride version that Yamazaki, again, that Takashi Yamazaki, he directed that video for the ride at Seibu, which is this retro Showa era theme park. So it's all very fitting with the themes of Yamazaki's films. It's the theme park version of Always Sunset on Third Street, and it's got the Godzilla ride. So there you go. So now I'm looking back at that, and it's like, okay, I'm seeing more of that Heisei influence, and it's sort of weird. I guess I don't know if I blocked it out. I didn't think of it because I Heisei Godzilla to me is like the most boring Godzilla. It's like the most just sort of boring average Godzilla. Um, Showa era is Showa era. Showa era is fun. I mean, and he changed over the Showa era as well. So I definitely prefer more early Showa, um, where like the original film. That's sort of my second favorite version of Godzilla. Um, or like the sort of more reptilian look they gave him in King Kong versus Godzilla, because they needed to contrast the villainous reptilian Godzilla versus the um, heroic mammalian King Kong. Um, and then yeah, Millennium, whether that's um, like the super edgy version of Godzilla with like the really spiky spikes, dorsal plates, um, or whatever. I mean, there's versions of in the Millennium series I don't really care for. Like, I don't think the Final Wars Godzilla is really all that great. Um, but he's different every time. Um, and then Shin Gojira is amazing. I love Shin Gojira's look. It's the first time I've been scared by Godzilla. Like, he looks horrific. Um, Heisei is just sort of there, and to me, he doesn't really communicate that this is an atomic abomination or anything like that. He's just sort of like this big dinosaur monster thing, and he's just sort of the most average version of Godzilla. So I don't know if I blocked it out, but if you're gonna try and make Heisei Godzilla look more interesting, this is the way to do it. Um, I still think I prefer the ride version. They're very close. These two versions are very close. As you can see, the dorsal plate's bigger and spikier, almost to the point actually where it's a little bit over the top. They made Godzilla, compared to the ride version, made him more scaly. The scales have become more of there's this plating of nodules all over him and little and smaller spikes and things. Um, I still think I kind of prefer the ride version actually, where it has those lumps and those scales and things, but you have more of like that skin that's kind of stretched, so it conveys more of that um, sort of like Hiroshima victim sort of look, where you have these patches of these scabs and nodules, and the rest is like that scar tissue kind of thing. It doesn't come across as well in the art that's been released here for Godzilla Minus One. Not saying it looks bad, just saying that it's sort of like it's an asterisk. It's a more um, it's just it's drawn a bit away from the ride version. I thought what was great about the ride version, it's pulled back a bit from that to go for a bit more um, of the dinosaur covered in tough nodule scales. Um, so I'm not saying it's a bad look at all. It's just sort of like it would be on my list. It would be like um, because the ride was number three, so it would be like you know negative 3 - 1, right? There we go. It'd be 3 - 1. um as far as my favorite Godzillas go, I think as a way to redeem the Heisei look, I think this is fantastic. So I can see it as like, okay, I see the Heisei influence, and this is an improvement on the Heisei version of Godzilla. So I'm not rushing out to buy merchandise of it. I still would prefer to get the ride version, which I'm going to wait to do until I get to the ride, which is saying that I realistically can see someday, maybe in a couple years, when hopefully our financial situation is stabilized and air travel isn't like a constant stream of horror stories of people losing their luggage, having flights canceled and stuff. Um, to be able to go to Japan in the next couple of years and to experience the Godzilla rides, plural, Seibuen and Waji Island, and some of the other stuff, Ghibli theme parks and things that weren't there, and Disney rides that weren't there when I was there last in 2009. Um, so it's on my list. I want to go there, and I want to get that Bondi Saw final of the ride Godzilla as a souvenir when I am there. So holding off on the buy and or whatever, getting that one because I want to get it as a souvenir. Um, but yeah, the minus one again, a fine version. Um, just now they're recognizing the Heisei influence in there. Still, overall, looking forward very much to this movie. I'm not going to be milking it for content. That's there's other videos, there's other people to watch for that. Um, but I just thought I wanted to do this video to just talk more about it and some more of my thoughts. And we'll see when new trailers come out and so on if I have any more thoughts to just shoot the breeze about. This was a very unstructured video. This was just me shooting the breeze about some extra thoughts that I had about the director and the design of the Godzilla and so on. And yeah, I'm actually looking forward to this movie, which is not something I can say about a lot of movies these days. I don't look forward to new movies. I look forward to seeing what movies are playing in like the classic series. When like every month the National Theatre chain here in Canada plays different classic movies, and it's like, what's the next one they're going to show? That's the only thing I'm excited about. Uh, Actual Hollywood movies, like, yeah, whatever. But this one I'm actually looking forward to. I really, really hope it doesn't disappoint. But given that Yamazaki is the person behind it, I am not expecting to be disappointed by this. I'm expecting this to be pretty amazing, and hopefully that hype will carry on through the rest of the thing. And I'm not bothering with the speculation. A lot of the content, a lot of people milking this for content. And again, I don't mean I'm saying that facetiously, but I don't mean to insult um, channels, good kaiju channels that are posting about this every day. You know, respect the hustle, right? Um, but I'm where was I going with this? um, that I totally lost track of what I was going with that. um, But yeah, well, oh yeah, I'm not speculating. Uh, I'm not. I'm not going to put out my list of things I hope to see in this film. That's a recipe for being disappointed with it. It's a new version of Godzilla. Every Reiwa film is different. Every Reiwa series, whatever's being produced for Godzilla in the Reiwa period, is very very different. And I don't. Actually, what I don't want to see is like, oh, you got to have Serizawa in it. You got to have the Oxygen Destroyer. Like, no, you don't. You don't have to have any of that. Let's just see where this one goes. Let's see what story Yamazaki wants to tell with his version of Godzilla, and I'm there for it. I want to be an open book about what does he want to do with it, what does he want to show us with it, and yeah, we'll see and take us on along for this ride, and hopefully it will live up to the hype and will not disappoint me as I'm actually going into this looking forward to it. So yeah, anyways, um, thanks for joining me on this 26 minute long just shooting the breeze, and we'll see where all this goes. Hopefully the hype continues.